Ken Trahan, Lenny Vangilder with our first NBC weekend review and week preview. And, of course, the final four teams are set for New Orleans. That in a moment. But first, NFL owners' meetings going on in Palm Beach, Florida. And Lenny, Sean Payton, and Mickey Loomis are there. Are you surprised at all?
A little. I guess this is an opportunity perhaps for them to get a little FaceTime with Roger Goodell in the aftermath of last week's punishments coming down. Maybe to tell a little bit more of their side of the story. We'll see what ends up happening there, if there's going to be any sort of appeal on the Saints' behalf. If we get any news of that this week. If Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis actually speak to the media this week, or Tom Benson for that matter. Honestly, I would be surprised if they do. Now, there is an opportunity for coaches to sit down at breakfast with the media. It's not a mandatory session. Sean Payton won't get fined if he's not there. You know, Bill Belichick has missed these things before. I would be surprised, indeed, if he is there.
Well, it really becomes this with regard to an appeal. We know that Roger Goodell is where the appeal goes. And, Lenny, the one way I can see the possibility, remote as it may be, of getting this suspension reduced is that Tom Benson rallies the support of his fellow owners. How many mulligans can he call in to try to get some help with a reduction? Because ultimately, Roger Goodell works for the owners.
He does, and that is certainly a possibility. The other thing that I think has a possibility of happening, depending on how long it would get dragged out, is the fact that if clearly there is evidence that this was going on in other places and the NFL has findings in that regard, does that lessen things in that while we know these things have gone on for years and years and years, you've got concrete evidence, the infamous 50,000 pages worth of documents in the Saints case. But can you come up with some of that evidence as it relates to other teams? Will it end up happening? Would that lessen the impact at all? That remains to be seen. But I think it comes back down to this, and we talked about this last week. The real punishment here is not for what happened. It's not because of the bounties. It's because of the lying and the cover-up.
Steve Spagnuolo making his mark on the organization, Broderick Bunkling in the fold, and then two linebackers joining this team as well, which clearly indicates they're going to go in a different direction at that position.
You would think so. Either that or they are just preparing for the fact that Jonathan Vilma is going to be away from this team for some length of time in 2012, perhaps the whole season. We don't know. We don't know what the Saints know. The NFL is still considering player penalties. They're getting the NFLPA involved to some degree. That's still to be seen. But in case, they've done pretty well for themselves in the linebacker position. Chamberlain and Lofton, both players still young enough in their careers, who are on the come, so to speak, in terms of what they could accomplish for this franchise.
After a promising opening performance, the Voodoo had a very bad performance against Milwaukee Friday night, losing and not drawing. Any concerns moving forward?
I think you got to maintain some consistency first of all, and obviously there's so much going on in this town right now. Once it becomes a little bit less about Final Four and things like that, and obviously everything that's going on from a Saints perspective has made this almost 24/7 Saints discussion in this town. That doesn't help them at all. No. So as it gets a little bit more towards things happening on the field, that has a chance to help them.
LSU salvaged a game at Auburn. They needed that game. All three one-run games. Tulane won 2 out of 3. That's not good enough against Maryland, Baltimore County, though. And where LSU's concerned, they had to win that Sunday game. But get used to it. These one-run games, that's the way it's going to be for them.
Yeah, this is a critical 2 weeks coming up for LSU. They've got Arkansas this week. They've got Florida next week. And I think they've got to at least get 2 out of those 6 and be 5-7 when we're sitting here 2 weeks from now in SEC play. As far as Tulane's concerned, they start Conference USA play this week, going to Memphis. I think there's got to be a little bit of a concern uptown. I mean, if this team can't get it going, this is going to be 4 consecutive years without an NCAA tournament appearance. They're in a triple-digit RPI right now, and I'll say this as well. LSU doesn't get it going, we could be really facing the possibility of 2 consecutive years without an NCAA tournament team from Louisiana.
Yeah, I think that's premature for LSU, but you're right about the next 2 weekends. We'll find out a lot about them, and we'll find out about Tulane in conference play now. And as we alluded to, the Final Four now set for New Orleans, and boy, you've got 13 national championships combined. Every one of these programs has won at least one. If you could have picked 4 before the season started, this was 4 pretty good choices.
Yeah, but the only thing you didn't do is include the state of North Carolina. But otherwise, this is as good as it gets and as good as we've seen in a long time as far as what you would call a blue blood Final Four. Kentucky, Louisville, Ohio State, Kansas. I mean, this is extraordinary. It will attract a lot of attention over the next week on New Orleans and the Superdome. and the big logo that is apparently getting painted on top of the dome. They're going to have a hood ornament on top of the dome now. So there will be a lot of attention on our town in the next week, and that's always great.
Yeah, it really is. And, of course, as far as who's going to win, I picked Kentucky before the tournament started. I've seen nothing to dispel that. I still like them to win it all, and I am picking them to beat Ohio State. I think the Buckeyes will beat Kansas.
Well, I picked North Carolina before it started. Based on what I've seen, I had shied away from Kentucky because I wasn't impressed with what I saw in the SEC tournament. What I've seen the last 2 weeks tells me they're the best team right now. They have dominated whoever it is they have played. They dismantled Baylor on Sunday.
Lenny, it's always a pleasure. Of course, we want to invite you to watch Sports NOLA TV, 6 p.m. Monday night on WHNO Channel 20. I know you will enjoy it. That's Sports NOLA TV right here on sportsnola.com as well after we're done. Lenny, it's always a pleasure.
A pleasure. We'll see you later this week.
All right, that's our first NBC weekend wrap-up and weekday preview. And for sportsnola.com, I'm Ken Trahan.